John, just before we go into this one, obviously, you've never really spoken much about this since obviously the investigations and stuff like that. So one thing I will say is thank you for approaching me after coming across this on LinkedIn, because I think it's really important to hear, um, you know, as we've discussed plenty of times before, the scenario from which we never heard, which was BP's side of things, because everything was basically demonizing BP. So I do appreciate you a lot for coming on. I will say that.
All right. Well, I appreciate. That's why I reached out to you after I saw Leela's thing, and that's why that's why I did, because it's been a long time, and there's things that can be said. So
yeah. So before we get into Deepwater Horizon, do you want to tell us a bit about where you started, where you came from, and that?
Yeah, I'll just do a really short synopsis here. Started in 1980. Yeah. First job was on the shallow water production platform in the Gulf of Mexico. Got into deepwater drilling in 1983. I did that until 1988. Then I worked in the Middle East for several years, working in the Persian Gulf. But then back to the United States land in Appalachia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia, New York. And then in 1997, came back into the Gulf of Mexico, did shallow water for 3 years. And then in 2000, got back into deep water and worked in deep water from 2000 to 2010. Then did a couple of years in Angola, which was lovely, by the way. Loved West Africa. Then after that, came back because I was involved in a civil trial, and then spent the last 7 years of my career with BP onshore. And I retired at the end of 2020.
BP onshore, what was your role when you were there?
I had different roles. I was the performance manager. I was the senior drilling engineer / drilling superintendent for several rigs in a play called the Haynesville, which was very, very challenging and very difficult. Some of the hardest wells ever drilled in my life. But in there, I from 2007 to 2010, I was assigned to Deepwater Horizon.
So obviously, this kind of ties us into what majority of this conversation is going to be about. Deepwater Horizon, you reached out, you heard Leo's side. Leo's version, obviously, as we've spoken about, and we're not going to, put anything down on anything here, but obviously, there was a lot of what was portrayed, not just by Leo, but by other media outlets. There was a lot of bother going up to the day of Deepwater Horizon, but what was the kind of lay of the land, so to speak, of Deepwater Horizon prior to the blowout?
Well, Deepwater Horizon was BP's best operating rig in the world, I believe. And let me clarify a couple of things so people know. Whatever I say is nothing, and is not BP. This is not BP. We put a disclaimer out there, and I need to do this because it's important to me. But what I say is John Guide is not BP. But prior to that, the Horizon started with Vastar, which is where I came from, and it worked 10 years with BP. They were the deepwater drilling rig exploration. They did go off and do other little projects, but their main reason was, their main remit was to drill the exploration wells for deep water. Gulf of Mexico drilling for BP. I was very lucky to be assigned to that. I thought it was actually they were giving me a compliment to letting me go work for these people, because they were, like I said, you can read this in the transcripts in the trial. I mean, I thought these people were the best in the business, and I still believe that to this day.
So, Macondo, I mind, we've spoken about this before. That well wasn't supposed to be drilled by Horizon, though, was it?
No, so what happened was there was a hurricane came through, and then Marianas was drilling the well at the time. Marianas was a moored rig, and the hurricane came through, and it gave severe damage to the rig, like $30 million. Why do I remember that number? I'll tell you here in a second, because it's actually important. So the rig was seriously damaged, so it couldn't continue drilling the well. Well, BP paid to fix the rig, so it wasn't, Transocean didn't pay. They might have paid something, a small amount, but BP paid to have the Marianas fixed and repaired back to. So, but it wasn't able to go do this in the schedule that BP wanted to. So we adjusted our schedule, which happened on a regular basis, and we went over and finished the Macondo well that was already drilled down to a certain point. It wasn't for the hurricane, we would have never even been there, because that wasn't even on our schedule. But that's the way deepwater drilling is. You only have so many vessels to go work on rigs, and they tell you, work on wells, and then they say this is where you're going to go, and that's where we went.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this show, and I really hope you're enjoying it. One thing I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to it and you're not liking, following, or subscribing to it, could I ask a massive favor that you do? It really helps the show, it helps me bring in more people, and it helps me get more stories out there, which in favor brings more stories back in. Let's get back to it. Was Macondo, I take it, well, Macondo was over budget, and was it over well out of time? So not out of time, but over time and over budget, was it? By the, at least at the period. Yeah.
They said that, but it wasn't. It was over budget and over time based on the fact that the Marianas was going to drill it, and so there was a time frame in there. And then BP had to pay, BP paid $30 or some more $1 million to get their rig fixed. What had nothing to do with the well. So when we showed up, the well was already way behind schedule and over budget. The well was. Not us, though. I'm the person that kept track of along with the engineers, of the time, the schedule, and how much money we were spending. And actually, we weren't over budget and we weren't behind schedule. But that never ever came up. I'm not talking about what happened before we got there. I'm talking about what happened when we were there. We weren't behind schedule. So
was it? I take it the challenges though prior to it was everything going as, so to speak, planned
on Macondo?
Yeah,
with the Marianas. Well, they had only got to the section where they didn't even land the BOP stack yet,
right?
Or maybe one whole section. So we got there. It was just in its fledgling state. It only had a couple casings for it set. So we just went there and continued the well. But that part of the Gulf of Mexico, and anything, if people that watch this have to remember, everything what is say is back in 2010. This isn't 2025. So the regulatory people I talk about, the way the wells are drilled, I don't know what's happened since then. But that part of the Gulf of Mexico, which was Mississippi Canyon, no salt, was a very challenging place to drill wells from the pore pressure fracture gradient standpoint, which is one of the reasons why I decided to actually come on your podcast, because I'm seeing the people that view it. These are the people that actually worked in the business. And so they'll understand this tight window of drilling a well, it makes it very difficult. And it was a challenging well.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this show, and I really hope you're enjoying it. One thing I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to it and you're not liking, following or subscribing to it, could I ask a massive favor that you do? It really helps the show, it helps me bring in more people, and it helps me get more stories out there, which in favor brings more stories back in. Let's get back to it. Was it really the well from hell?
No.
No.
No, shit. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to say that word?
So yeah, you could swear, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So the first time I heard the saying "well from hell" was 1980. 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, the first year I started. It rhymes. It rhymes. Come on. It's the oil field. You got a bunch of goofballs in the oil field. They love to make up sayings. You have to. I can't even. I could go into a litany of all the sayings that was not the well from hell. I drilled. This is actually a really interesting point about it. So I made a statement in a meeting one day with the legal people. And I said, this was by far not the hardest well I ever drilled in my life. And they were flabbergasted. They just couldn't believe it. There's a key point here. Drilled. Okay. And that's why I'm really hoping that the people that listen to this are the people who actually drill wells in the Deepwater arena. We drilled the well. Were there problems? Yeah. There were the normal problems you have in exploration. But we drilled the well to TV, and we logged the well for days, because that's what you do in exploration. We're there to get data. We then turned around and ran casing and cemented the casing and tested the casing. So drilling the well was actually a success. It was a subsequent operation that wasn't a success. It was not drilling a well. It was by far not the hardest well I ever was involved with drilling in my life.
How did that day go for you? Because obviously you were on the beach at the time, as we've spoken about on via message and whatnot. But how did that day go for you?
Well, the day we ran the casing, all that was actually good. There was some complications, which I'll tell about. So we ran the casing. We get to watch it. I'm sure the what they see now is way more than what we saw back then. But I watched them run the casing screen, and it went straight bottom. It went straight into the well. So I know Leo said there was a crunching thing or something happened. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, because that didn't happen. But when we did land the casing string in the wellhead, when you drill a well like this, one of the things that BP, and I think most people probably still use today, I don't know this, we did everything we could not to put a surge on the well, so we would keep the fluid column in the well. So we had what was called autofill float equipment, and we had a diverter up in the riser. But with a diverter, it helps divert flow that comes up the drill pipe and goes out into the riser. It reduces the pressure effect of you running the casing into the well. The casing went straight into the hole, and I mean I was very, very happy. But then we went to convert the float equipment. It was supposed to convert at a certain pressure, and it didn't. We had our engineer on the rig, the BP engineer. We had two engineers for a while. We had a lead engineer and an other engineer. This was the other engineer, very, very smart young man. We went to convert the float equipment, and it didn't convert at the right pressure. So he got on the phone and called the equipment manufacturer and we talked about what we could do to convert the foreign equipment. And then we did. We went by their instructions, and we went up sequences because this all came out in the trial, which was completely skewed. When they say you can go to a certain pressure, well, you just don't go to that pressure. You ramp it up into little steps. And we did in the converting. And so what that means is the flow wouldn't go up the pipe no more. It would go down the pipe because there's valves in there. But when we did establish full circulation, the pressures were way lower than the model said it was going to be. And to this day, I can't tell you why it was. I know a person on LinkedIn, a nice gentleman that wrote a PhD thesis or something about it. He commented about maybe it was gas coming in. Well, it might have been. I don't know. I still can't tell you because I don't know. But we went ahead and did the job. We pumped the cement. Oh, let me back up. There's a very important point. Don, one of the drill foremen on the rig, he called me and said the pressures are a lot lower than what we anticipated. Let's make sure we don't have a leak. So we did. We had this diverter tore up the hole. It had a hole in it. It was in a riser. And when you drop a ball, it closes. Well, all that looked good. So we went through the sequence of making sure that piece of equipment was closed, and it was. So we pumped the job, and it went fine. And we pumped the whole volume. We had complete returns. As we get into the technical, we bumped the plug on strokes, which means we pumped X amount of barrels. It was supposed to land at those barrels. It did. We had full returns the whole way. Then we set the pack. We tested the casing, set the pack off, everything tested. So now I'm, as the superintendent, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Then I went home and I went to bed.
When was the negative? See the negative test that obviously, probably most people who know about Deepwater Horizon would have come across. When was that? Were you in? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, were you about when the negative test was done?
Yeah, I was still awake at the time, but we had a protocol. On the rig, and that was, here's our plan. We're going to do this, and this. And I was not a micromanager. So if the plan is going according to plan, then don't call me. If there's an issue, call me. So they performed the negative tests, and obviously it didn't pass. So we could talk about that later. I'm not exonerating myself or anything like that.
No.
No one called me, but I didn't ask them to call me because I was like, if everything's going okay, then don't call me. So they didn't. But it obviously didn't pass.
Why do you think that? Why do you think they carried on knowing that though?
I don't know. There's two things to this day that no one's ever explained to me, and I don't know if they explained to anybody. That's a big deal. So Halliburton pumped a cement job, and Halliburton, in my opinion, is the premier cementing company in the world. I have the utmost respect for that, and I still do. And I worked for them all the way up until I retired. We pumped a cement slurry that didn't set up. I don't know why it didn't set up, but it didn't. Halliburton didn't pump a slurry they didn't want to set up. They wanted it to set up, but it didn't. I can't tell you why it didn't. And the other thing that happened was we did a negative test before we pulled the riser. And it happens every day in deepwater drilling. And all the people involved with that believed it was okay. And they continued, but it wasn't. I still don't know the reason why to this day. No one's ever told me.
So you led the investigation. You led part of the investigation, didn't you? After Macondo.
No, I led no investigations.
No, you were part of the investigation. Sorry, is what I meant to say. Sorry.
Yes.
You were part of the investigation. What was the outcome of the negative test for you? Like what they found out. Sorry.
Well, the negative test was failed. We did a simple YouTube test of water. It's YouTube testing has been around for a long time. I don't know how long it's been around. But at the end, if you have the same weight fluid on one side or the other, would you bleed the pressure off? It should basically be 0. And it wasn't. It was over 1,000 PSI on one side, 0 on the other. So I can't tell you, but I can say there were a lot of smart people involved in that decision, and they believed it was okay. So I don't know what happened.
So the actual incident, why Deepwater Horizon had the disaster in the end, then from your findings and from what you know, and what is the step-by-step issues that went down that night?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't give you the step-by-step issues.
Yeah,
but it was I can give you my personal opinion, which is not in any investigation like that. That everybody involved in our operation should have done better. Everybody, everybody, everyone involved in the operation should have done better. There's I'm probably get me in trouble here, but I was actually the superintendent de jure. The Deepwater Horizon was a ongoing operation that BP had since 2000, coming in from Vastar. That they had a bunch of people before me, and all these guys did great jobs. And it was plug and play because they had this machine going that was the best performing well in the fleet. And it was interesting every year at the anniversary of the accident, there'll be LinkedIn comments, and one of the guys who was a previous superintendent for Horizon, his name was Bill, and the same last names. His name was Bill, and he wrote on LinkedIn that the guys that rigged deserved better, and they did. Everyone involved with the operation should have done better, and they did.
So obviously after Horizon, the investigations and that start, how was your experience of that?
The investigations could be like a whole different, be a book, which I would never write because I don't want to. There were so many that it was interesting. They were all very different. The first one was the MBI hearing, which is where you can see me on C-SPAN. Now, this was a very bizarre event. It was almost like, it's hard to explain. My lawyer, because BP appointed me lawyers and paid for them, and these guys were great. I love them. The Marine Board Investigation was run by a joint group of the Coast Guard. The Deepwater Horizon, like all Deepwater rigs, they're a boat. They're floating around there. So for the Coast Guard, they're what's called a class vessel. So they are heavily involved with its operation. And then the MMS, which is not called the MMS anymore, but I'm going to call it that for this podcast because that's the era I worked in. They were the people that you would tell them what you're going to do, and they gave you approval. There was a set of rules. and everything. They had a joint investigation, and that's what you saw. This, and that's what you would see on the C-SPAN feed. And then I went into this investigation, and they spent 10 hours of berating me, basically. But it didn't mean anything because I don't even know what the results of the MBI investigation was. I don't remember reading anything. So that investigation was very, very weird, where people would continuously come up and ask me the same question over and over again, but it was Halliburton, Transocean, and then all the different people. There's an important point here, and this goes back to what your podcast, I believe, was about. This is the people working on your rig, right? Well, so we're BP's the operator. We have Transocean, Halliburton, MI, guy that Leo worked for. We work together every day, 24 hours a day, 24/7. And all of a sudden, you have each other's back. Is life perfect on an offshore drilling rig? No, it's not. No. We had each other's back all the time. And now all of a sudden, you have this catastrophe, this accident happen, and now everyone's against each other. But it wasn't because the hands were against each other, because they weren't. It was the way the legal people made it, and I was actually surprised, a little bit surprised, maybe naive, about how bad it was, how abusive it was about the Transocean people that interrogated me, and the Halliburton people that interrogated me, and the state of Louisiana, the state of we all work together, So why are we against each other now? I didn't understand that. If you work on rig, and especially if you live there, it's not like that. Do you like everybody on the rig? No. There's always an asshole, at least one. I don't know why that is, but on the Horizon, there's 200 people on this rig. It's a lot of people. So, I was actually a little bit taken back by the fact that all of a sudden now we're against each other, because I sure as hell never felt that way. We were drilling a well. I thought we were only together.
Yeah.
The investigations weren't made that way. They was made to make us against each other. It was the United States legal system is messed up when it comes to something like this. They weren't prepared for something like this. And to this day, I still just shake my head, because, these are people you work with every day, day in and day out, and all of a sudden they're your enemy. They weren't your enemy. So it was a terrible experience.
One of the things you said to me actually, in the lead up to coming on, it was what was published and what actually happened didn't line up. Why do you think they turned everything around in that way?
Okay, so let's put this in perspective. You have the Deepwater, you have the offshore industry, and I don't know how many people work in the offshore industry that was involved with fossil fuel, hydrocarbon. I know you do stuff about wind and solar or whatever, all that stuff, but stay with fossil fuel. Maybe in the whole world, 300,000 people, maybe, I don't know. But I do know that when the accident happened, there were 150 rigs out there floating around drilling deepwater wells. That's 150 rigs, right? So the guy in charge of the rig is the OIM. That means that day there were 150 people, 150 OIMs working that day. Company men. If it was set up like the Horizon, there were 300 company men working that day in the world. Senior tool pusher, very important position. There were 150 of them working a day. Drillers.
Mm.
I'm sorry, tool pushers. I'm going on and on. A very,
Yeah.
very small amount of people. The rig has
Yeah.
200 people on it, right? All right. That's 30,000 people working in all right.
Deepwater.
Then the accident.
Yeah.
Then the accident happens. And it's on the cover of every TV station in the United States. I don't know what it was like in the UK. I have no idea. Every newspaper. And then all of a sudden, even though this industry is such a small group of people that really know what's going on, you have a 60 Minutes article from CBS. You have a CNN special that has some dude on it that never even saw a deepwater rig as long as ever in his life. He wouldn't know a deepwater rig from an apple or banana. All right. They come on and do an hour special. Now, everybody is a deepwater drilling expert. Well, I never met a deepwater drilling expert in my life. I still have. So, and they come out with all these things. They had a guy from the University of California come out and say, well, the only reason this happened is because BP is a bunch of evil people and it was bound to happen. They don't know anything about what we were doing. That guy didn't build B. I mean, what the hell is this? This is crazy. Everyone's a deepwater drilling expert, but there's not. There's people who might think they are, but they know they're not. But the media convicted BP before anything was found out. And that's a fact. You can look at the history. It is a fact. And it is not something that, I'm making up. You can go through the timeline. The FBI hearing I went to, which was the Marine Board investigation, happened in July. Okay. Prior to that, they had already had our CEO before Congress and stuff like that. And they were talking about, well, it happened because you didn't do this, and this. Well, we still hadn't even re-entered the well and found out what happened. And so BP was tried and convicted before the trial ever happened. That's my opinion. That's not BP's opinion. That's John Gatt's opinion.
Do you think BP and Transocean were treated fairly at all during the investigation?
I don't think anyone was treated fairly. No, it wasn't their intent. Their intent was not fairness. So, as a person in my position, and hopefully there are people who understand this, we actually went to incident investigation training where you investigate incidents that happen because there's, unfortunately, things happen. And you have an accident, which is what this was. It was a complex industrial accident. You have an accident. All right? So now you have an investigation. All right. What happened? All right. Figure out why it happened. What can we do to not make it happen again? None of that was what you saw. All these investigations were basically centered around, so the government investigations were centered around a narrative to put all the blame on BP. It's pretty blatant. I mean, it just is the truth. I mean, and once again, I'm not saying this is BP's opinion.
No,
it's John's.
Yeah.
This is John's opinion. Yeah.
Because obviously the media, I'll not go too much detail on my thoughts on the mainstream media, especially nowadays. And back then it was obviously, I don't think it was quite as bad, but they crucified you.
Oh, yeah.
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 Absolutely crucified
they said all these things. Yeah. They said things, but once again, these people became deepwater drilling experts in an hour. So that's why I made the little narrative here at the beginning. There's like 30,000 people in the world that's doing this. There's 7 billion people in the world. At the same time that accident happened, there were over what is a very let me think of it, highly regarded position in the world. a doctor. There were over 1 million doctors working in the United States when that accident happened. There were 150 OIMs working when that accident happened in the world. Now let's get real here. These people had no idea what we're doing, and they still don't know what goes on. It's not just a complex operation. You're also out there living with people for either 3 or 4 or 5 weeks at a time, and that's when you bring Leo in. It's very, very important. It is a different perspective for the people that are there and the people in the office and how and their perceptions. But it's been that way since I started, and I'm sure it was like that before I did too. And I have no idea what it's like because my last deepwater job was Angola, and that ended in the end of 2011. Maybe it's different now, but I doubt it. I'm sure it's the same.
How much does politics have a part to play in the way that everything went?
Well, the politics was 100% of how it all went. It was, I did investigations with Chemical Safety Board, and it was sort of a little bit out of their league. They were very nice people. And then this is outside of the MBI hearing. Of course, I did a deposition for the civil trial, which we can talk about later. That was 17 hours of deposition for the civil trial. It's 900 pages long. And then we had the most interesting group of people was the Presidential Commission. They decided to form this group of people, and they hired a lawyer out of Illinois, Chicago, to lead it. And they were the only people, I believe, that actually tried to understand what we were saying. These guys were smart. I didn't get to meet a lot of smart people, not in the oil and gas business, but in the legal business. You can tell these guys were at a different level than the other folks. These guys were smart. And they asked really great questions. In their final report, you can see me in it. It's the Presidential Commission. I think I mentioned the most. But at the end of the day, it was redacted. It was edited. All these investigations, I'm going to say this one more time, and people are going to hate it. They want your podcast. This is my opinion, not BP's. Okay, but what we said and what was put in there is not exactly the same thing. It was redacted. It was changed to put the blame on BP. So as far as I'm concerned, all those investigations were basically useless. But I didn't see anything come out of it that said, this is what we need to do to make it safer.
Did you have any pressure on you from upper management at all?
No. No, I had no pressure from management when I was drilling the well, and I had no pressure from management during the trials and all the investigations. No, zero, none. And like I said, even drilling the well, people said that we were woefully. What was the one woefully behind schedule and over budget? That's a bunch of BS. We weren't. We had a well to go to, but once again, just saying to the people that actually work offshore, you work on a well, it takes as long as it's going to take. And that's just the way it is. And I can't change that. Neither can they. It just takes as long as it takes. And if BP put themselves in a position where they were going to get fined or something like that because we didn't get there in time, it's really not my problem. I mean, because I don't have any control of that. And it goes to Leo, what Leo said, and that's the reason I reached out. Leo's perspective there was that, we had to go to this well called Nile. We did. He mentioned that it was a well that we had to go complete, which we didn't. That's right. Let's clean it up. let's clean up a little bit. We were going to plug the well. So it was on the P&A list, and it got to the point where the MMS said, you got to go plug this well. And so we inserted that into the well that we're going to go drill next, which was called Cascada. And that's why Blair was out there, because they had the people who were going to, the asset we're going to P&A this well for, which is plug and abandon, wanted certain things done. And so he was out there looking at how to hook certain pieces of equipment up because that's what these people wanted done. Because the rig was actually built to drill wells. It was not outfitted to complete wells. You really couldn't complete a well. Well, I guess you could, but it would take a lot of boats and rig and roll to do. And so he was not right about that. It wasn't, we're going to complete the well, we're going to plug the well. And then we can get a whole bond log story, which is a whole story in itself that you can have tons of offshoot things in, because it's probably one of the more interesting things. Once again, the people that watch it understand what that means.
So obviously, we'll go back to the media a bit just before we get into the trial. But do you believe that from the outset they were out to make you guys the villains from the get-go, yourselves and Transocean? Because you personally never spoke to the media, did you? Even though you were, you took large parts of the trial, you were part of the investigation and whatnot.
You never spoke to the media, and if they would have reached out, I wouldn't have, because the way the United States media is, I don't know the way the media is in the UK. I can't.
Oh, I think you do. I think it's very similar to the way it is in the States.
There was no way in the world I would have believed for 1 second that what I told them would be what you saw on TV. I don't believe it. That's why I would have talked to them, because they would have manipulated, edited that to make me. Let me give you a good example. This is a great example. In the trial. Okay, the trial. The Deepwater Horizon spent, let me get this, about $13 a second. All right. $1.2 million a day. So you're in the trial, go back to the bond log. Here's the question. Not running the bond log saved you money. Yes, but, and the questions. All right. Well, we didn't run a bond log, not because it was going to save money. We had a decision tree, which we went through if you want. But that's not the way it showed up. BP didn't run a bond log because we're saving their money. Well, anything in critical path on this operation saves you money. You're spending $13 a second. So, but that's not why we didn't run the bond log. So I'll go into that real quick. We had a decision tree, which was involved with a bunch of different people, all the high qualified people, and it said that if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, then we're not going to run it. But if this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen and this doesn't happen, then we will. And so we got the Schlumberger crew out there, great company, and I know it showed up in the movie. I didn't see the movie. I saw little snippets.
Did you never watch it?
No, I lived it. I haven't watched that. It was a I don't know, it wasn't science fiction, but it was. It didn't. That way though. It's not the way the world worked in the rig that I was associated with. I could tell you that. But first and foremost, and we'll just skip around here a little bit. The electrician is not the center point of the rig. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I'm not quite sure if I ever met the guy or not. I don't know. There's 200 people on the rig. Yes, the electrician is important. There's no doubt about it. But he's not involved in the drilling of the well. There's a lot of people on the rig, and every position is important. Like a great example, the people that keep the rig clean and mop the floors, wash your clothes, feed you, keep your room clean and make your bed. They're just as important as me. I was the drilling superintendent. Well, and a lot of people didn't agree with me with this, even in my company. But to me, everyone on the rig was the same. They all had a job to do. They needed to do it. And all I know is having lived on a rig, it is really good to go to a clean bed, have clean clothes, and have a half decent meal. So everyone there has a good job. The electrician, his job was important too, very important. But he had nothing to do, zero, about drilling that well.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this show, and I really hope you're enjoying it. One thing I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to it and you're not liking, following, or subscribing to it, could I ask a massive favor that you do? It really helps the show, it helps me bring in more people, and it helps me get more stories out there, which in favor brings more stories back in. Let's get back to it.
So, but he happened to be the guy that he went to the New York Times, I guess, and they wrote an article about it. I guess he thought he'd get rich. I don't know if he did or didn't.
Leo did have a wee joke about that. In fairness, and I think most offshore people will probably say very much the same thing about the Hollywood side of that movie. It was just Hollywood, was it?
Well, the sad part about it is that's what people will think what really the way it was, and it's just not like that.
No.
The movie was fantasy. It was a movie. It had nothing to do with what really happened. And I'm pretty sure he didn't jump off the helipad because, having been on the horizon, that's pretty far off, So
I think Leo actually says that the way that it's been portrayed is actually a lot different. I think from what I've heard, but we'll not go down that route. But we'll go back to what we'll get onto is actually the trial. We've spoken about it before, or off recording and whatnot. But I'm not going to beat around the bush. But you were absolutely crucified during the trial, were you? In fairness.
Well, not so much in the civil trial, but in the MBI hearing. Yeah, that was here's the part that's really interesting about that. So somewhere along the line, and I don't know where it came from, they put together a list of 6 or 7 things that they said we didn't do that caused the accident. One was like circulating bottoms up. We didn't do that. We didn't run a liner and tie it back. We didn't set a lockdown hanger. There were a couple others. I don't remember what they were. In fact, they even asked Tony Hayward, who was our CEO at the time in Congress. They asked him about some of these things. The interesting part about this is that the well was still flowing. It was not controlled, and it was not re-entered. So I don't know where that list came from, but after that, the list came out. The media basically crucified BP in every way, shape, or form. That all you guys were just trying to save money. Well, I can tell you right now, it's just not true. And a lot of people aren't going to believe me, and I don't care if they do or don't. But that's not the truth. So but the media, before we ever re-entered the well, after it was killed, had already tried and convicted BP. And they were completely wrong. They said this happened, and this happened. If you go look at the C-SPAN article, the video, you'll see this relentless. I don't know what the word to say is, about centralizers. If you watch it, everyone attacked me for these centralizers things. It was things you put on casing when you run it. Well, the part that was at the end of the day, they had a model that ran, and it said that there was going to be a problem. Well, the model was wrong, and I didn't see the model before we actually cemented the well. I was not the engineer on the well, so and this is not a cop-out or anything like that. So you have different responsibilities on what you do, and I was not the engineer. We had two engineers that worked on the well, and my responsibility was not to design the cement job. My responsibility was to pump the cement, implement the cement job. Completely different. And we did that. But the model is a model. It is not a actual, what actually happens in the real world. The input on the model was wrong, which they didn't notice at the time, even though I did. So they all took their cue of was lining up and just abused me about not putting these extra centralizers on. Well, the real story of the centralizers is that I was sick, and I was down the count. Luckily I got the receipt from the urgent care center I went to prove that I was actually sick, because they said I wasn't, but I was. I don't know why that was. They had to put that in there, but they did. So when I ran all the models, it said you need to put more centralizers on. When the model works, you always need more centralizers, so that doesn't matter. All right, so they sent 15 more out. In Halliburton, the people said that's what they recommended. They didn't. The reason they sent 15 more centralizers out to put on the casing was because somebody fit in helicopter. That's it. It wasn't a design change. The way that model works, you could put centralizers as far as up as you want. It's going to make it look better. Okay, that's just the way the model works. Okay, so we got persecuted about that relentlessly. Here's the important part. Well, Halliburton actually had a more sophisticated model in their shop, in their lab. And they ran it with the centralizers we ran. Lo and behold, it was fine. They destroyed the results. The people that destroyed those results were convicted and put on probation. Now, the media doesn't say that, right? But having cemented hundreds and hundreds of strings of casing, both actually seeing it happen, usually when you cement a well, the best cement's at the bottom. The whole Macondo formation was at the bottom, the very bottom of the well. The odds are it was going to get the best cement possible. It was not foamed. It was real cement. But that when the little idiosyncrasy come out that, the role model said it was fine, you didn't see anything come out and say that, the role model, it was going to be okay. You don't hear that kind of stuff. It's all by the wayside because BP was already tried and convicted in the Marianas mine. But that's and Joe made Leo made a statement about the bond log, and I really need to clear a couple things up because they've actually bothered me for a long time. All right, the Schlumberger crew's there. All right, why is the Schlumberger crew there? I didn't see the movie, so I don't know them going away in a helicopter and all that happy stuff. After 9/11 happened, the United States changed the rules on comings and goings from offshore, from the United States to an offshore facility. It changed for Homeland Security. So the way it was, and someone can chime in if they know, it was easier to put you on the manifest the night before than it was to put you on in the morning. So we would put a long list of people on the manifest to go in the night before, just because it was easier. Government work. That's it. We put a lot of people never went, myself included. But you still put your name on the list because it was easier. That's it. You know, we put the Schlumberger guys on it because we had a decision tree. Here we go. Put the decision tree. All right. And then they everything worked fine. So the Schlumberger guys all went home. Were they mad about it? Maybe because they didn't get to make extra money. I have no idea. But Leo said if you ran the bond log, then you would have known what a cement top was. And you would set an RTTS tool and all this stuff. And it's all just, it's not accurate. I mean, I believe his perspective. But first of all, the RTTS tool is not something you put in the well to temporarily abandon and come back a couple of years later and re-enter. It's a large piece of iron that is basically impossible to get rid of if you can't get it out. And you don't put cement on top of it, at least not on something that you want to go back and re-enter. There are other plugs you can put in that would have done what he mentioned. His nomenclature is wrong. He's not. But that was never in the plan. It was never in the plan. We were never going to set a plug if the bond log wasn't good. To the best of my knowledge, I might not remember. But also the cement top. He said, well, you find out what a cement top is. And then if you run this, you're going to be okay. It's also just not true. I mean, bond logs are great, and I've run hundreds of them in my life, but they're not definitive. They're not like if you run this, it's right, because I've seen where they were not right. And there's actually a great example on Macondo when it wasn't right. The other thing is about it is that the Macondo actual formation and float was across the float equipment. All right. So when you drill a well, you leave X amount of joints of casing that the cement stays in. That's a barrier. The little valves in there are not barriers, but the cement is. And it goes around. And for us to be able to get the bond log to actually see what the cement was like across the formation, we would have had to have gone in and drilled that out, because the bond log would only give you what was above it, which Neil said it would see where the cement top was. Okay, make the long story short, that's not the way the cement flowed. I'm sorry, that's not how the well flowed. All the people ahead of time, before they re-entered the well, said the well flowed up this annular space from the dirt to the outside of the casing. It went up this way. Well, anyone who was involved with actually knowing how wells produce to flow knew that wasn't right, because the flow was too hard to have gone up that space. It was a long way to go with basically against dirt and steel to get to a space. And then you have to get by the wellhead. Well, the wellhead in a deepwater drilling operation, the wellhead has what's called a casing hanger in it. And you land the casing in this hanger, and so the casing hanger lands in a wellhead. And before you actually set the seal assembly, the clearance in there is like 32 thousandths of an inch. That's very small. So the people that actually knew about how wells flowed, the flow came straight up the casing the whole time. So that bond log where he said the cement top on nailless would mean nothing. And you would have had to have gone and drilled the float equipment out to actually run the bond log to get the correct evaluation of it. Now, how complicated is that? It would have been, except for we didn't have the correct BOP configuration to pick up the correct pipe to go drill it out. So, you have a deepwater rig has what's called variable bore rams in the BOP stack. The Horizon drill was 6 5/8 drill pipe. I don't know if they have bigger drill pipe now. I'm sure they do. But at the time, it was one of the larger size drill pipes you can. And because of the casing string we sent, you would have had to drill this out with 3.5-inch drill pipe. The rams we had in there didn't close between that distance. So you would have had to have got a dispensation from the MMS to go in there and do this. But if I was the MMS, I wouldn't have gave it because you're drilling out one of your barriers. I mean, but that never came up. So he's not accurate on that. Yeah. Just because you're on a bond, it doesn't mean that you have good bond. It just is another it was another thing that we could have done, but we didn't. And we had a decision tree and we followed it.
But was Macondo going to be a good well?
I think it was good
in terms of production,
well.
I say.
That's why we kept it. It was
yeah.
That's why I was all in favor. I was all in favor of keeping it. Absolutely. The superintendent doesn't get we get a say, but at the end of the day, you still are you're delivering a product for the asset, so you don't get the final say. I was totally in favor and running the casing string and keeping the well. But that said, going back to the some of the things that they said what we did wrong way at a time, none of those were true. They were all wrong. And but you never heard anything come back and say, oh, all these things we said you said you did wrong. Well, no, they were okay. You didn't hear anything like that. I don't know, maybe you did. I didn't.
No. Well, I obviously I heard, well, obviously as you do through the rumor mill offshore, but there was a rumor going around at the time that they actually did do another. They did drill Macondo again, but just from a different location. Is basically, that was one of the things I heard, but I don't know how true it was. If BP did go back on the well,
I don't think BP did, but maybe someone else did. I don't know. And the other rumor, I got to put the other rumor. The best one of the whole lot though is that Schlumberger called out there to get the crew off. No.
Yeah.
So as the superintendent on the rig, I can tell you they didn't do that. These guys in women, I don't know if there are men or women on there or not. The crew, Schlumberger crew, because Schlumberger is actually one of the first most proactive companies of having women offshore. They would have had to have talked to me, and no one called me because they probably had no idea about that cement job. They were setting up. They got there. They checked their equipment out. If they got, I don't remember when they got there, but they probably either went to bed or went and hang out and watch TV, make sure the unit's working right. So they didn't know.
They never called the rules.
Of course not. I don't think Schlumberger, maybe they have in the history of Schlumberger, but not in my 40 years working on oil and gas. I can tell you, I can't remember, and most of it being offshore. I can't remember anyone flying the helicopter out there now to pick up their people because they were afraid. No, it doesn't happen that way. It just doesn't. I mean, it's so ludicrous. It's almost impossible to stay with a straight face. They didn't. They weren't worried. So it still makes me a Gabriel because it's so stupid.
How much of a toll did the trial take on you?
It probably took it took a lot. The civil trial was more like a trial. The investigations were they were tough, just because a lot of them were uncontrolled. The worst one was the shortest one. It was with the United States Department of Justice Criminal Division. These guys out of Philadelphia that came down to investigate the accident as a crime, not a civil crime, but a crime. And these people were they were not most people. And they were I spent 4 hours with these. They were it's almost hard to even talk about because how nice these people are. I'm not going to say their names, but they were. I don't know what their motive was because there was no crime committed. It was been complicated industrial acts. People can disagree with that or not, but at the end of the day, that's really what it was. But these people were trying to find people to put in jail, and I was a prime suspect. So I went and met with them for 4 hours, and these people were evil. There's no other word for it. The best example I could give you is there was a string of 5 emails that led up to what happened. And I don't even know if they were directly involved with what happened, but there was a string of 5 emails. And the lead guy said, okay, he laid the 5 emails out. And then he put his hands up and he took 2 of them away. He said, so now there's only 3 emails. There's not 5, there's 3. He said, well, what does this email train say with just these 3? And I said, it means nothing. But that's not what I asked him. What does it mean if I just say, put these 3, but take these 2 away? I said, it means nothing. And then he said, well, let me ask you again. What are these 3 emails say here without these 2? And I said, it means nothing. They said to me that, well, if you're not going to answer the question, I'm going to order in contempt. And then you threaten me and my family. So the United States Department of Justice, which I later decided to call them United States Department of Injustice, criminal people. And in my letter, correctly, you said actually the true statement is the United States Department of Injustice. I find injustice is not the correct vocabulary. It's injustice. And that's the way those people were. I don't know what their motive was. I didn't make a name for themselves. I don't know. But I never got indicted. And as I shouldn't have, nor has anybody. No one should have gotten indicted. It wasn't a criminal offense. It was a accident. Nobody intended this to happen. It did. But it definitely wasn't criminal. It was a tragedy. Absolutely. People died. And the United States Department of Justice came in and said, all this stuff, but, all you got to do is read between the lines. If the United States in general was so concerned about everything and the people were affected. So go past the poor people that lost their lives. That's the biggest tragedy of the whole thing. And the people were affected from the environmental catastrophe that happened. It was moved out in the door of a lot of places. If they were so worried about these people's livelihoods, well, then why the BP set up this huge centers everywhere to pay these people money, and they put to help compensate them for their losses. And there are a lot of people that lost stuff. Well, why did they take federal taxes up if they were so concerned about their livelihood? When you, in the United States, and I don't know what it works in the UK, when you give somebody a check for $500,000 lump sum, in the United States, they take 36% straight off the top. So your $500,000 is now $350,000. If they were so worried about their livelihood, why did they take taxes up? Doesn't make any sense to me. It was just another way for them to get more money, because at the end of the day, that's what it was all about. How much money are we going to get? And they got
How supportive of BP over you during the whole period?
BP was fantastic.
Yeah.
BP was fantastic. I have no complaints. The other thing I'd like to make a comment on before I forget is, and actually pull the book out because I think it's very important for the people that work in this business. Very important is that every year and the anniversary, there's always comments on LinkedIn about this thing was going to be a failure from day one, and I can't tell you how wrong that is. And that was also portrayed on the media, because they said BP didn't know what they're doing and all this happened stuff. And these guys from all those professors came out and said it was just a regular BP. So the drill a deepwater well, especially an exploration well, there's a huge amount of people involved, a huge amount of people. And a lot of these people are extremely highly educated people. And I'm going to show you a book here. I got it out on purpose. But this is not Macondo. There's another one called Platinum. You see this? There's a thing on here. Section 2 point, I can't see it. All right. Core pressure fracture building. All right. So this is the book. Macondo's was the same thing. I don't have it anymore because it's not my property. It's BP's property. The government came in and took everything. But when someone comes in and said this was going to be a failure from day one, this book takes years in the making. It starts back way before when they do the seismic on the property, and they figure out you actually can drill a well there. And then, but the actual planning takes 6 or 7 months. And for people to say that it was going to be a failure from day one is just complete bullshit. The amount of the smart people and the time and effort that's put in to make something like that. And why is it important to the people that work offshore? What's really important? Because without the people that make this, they don't have a job. They don't have industry. It doesn't exist. These rigs out there floating around, they got to figure out where to drill a well at. It just doesn't happen. It was not going to be a failure from day one. These people put a lot of time and effort into this. And it's actually a really insult to anybody who works in the deepwater drilling business. So, sorry I had to say that, but I did.
No, I think that's a good thing about, the fact that you came on, because it can't be easy to see a lot of what came after it, when considering that, a lot of people, as you said, probably don't have a clue, or they don't have a clue what they're saying. And that's the unfortunate thing about social media is the keyboard warriors come out and the experts come out in numbers when situations, like this have happened. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, as they say. But, if you could leave people that are listening to this and one truth that probably gets lost about Macondo, what would it be?
Well, first and foremost, it was an accident.
Yeah.
Look, nobody wanted to die. I mean, they made it like this, the way the media came across that was all. It's hard to explain. So it's really such a difficult even thing to answer. Does anyone think that really, if you're partially intelligent, or even an IQ above room temperature, the BP wanted this to happen? The Transocean want this to happen? The Halliburton want this to happen? No. The we cut corners, we didn't. We didn't. Could it have been done differently? Absolutely. But it was not intentional, which a lot of the media said it was. I mean, we basically said, "Oh yeah, which is beyond ludicrous. I mean, it's insulting." Like I said before, there's two things that happened that I'd still don't understand. One was the cement didn't set up. I don't know why. Halliburton is one of the premier cementing companies in the world, and I love them. I did. Transocean, I love them. One of the best deepwater drilling contractors in the world, But for some reason, the cement didn't set up. Everybody on that rig decided that we had a negative test, and it was okay. And it wasn't. I still don't know why that either one of those things occurred. But at the end of the day, it was a very complex industrial accident. And go back to you showed a Swiss cheese thing. Remember the Swiss cheese thing you showed? Yeah. Well, BP didn't invent that, and it wasn't invented for Macondo. I mean, it was it's been around for a long time. It's just like any other complex accident. Everything has to line up perfect. How far back do you want to go? I mean,
no, 100% agree on that. Obviously, Piper Alpha as well.
I think
same scenario. Yeah.
No, that's the biggest thing. Is it was an accident. Nobody wanted first and foremost, no one wanted anyone to die. My God, and these people that were out there, they didn't want to die. I mean, holy cow, they had families, and they made it look so. It was just made to look wrong, and I think that's hopefully the people that watch your podcast that actually do work in the business. You got to work in the business, and that's why I said that at the beginning about it's such a small amount of people. I mean, with 7 or 8 billion people in the world, there's 300,000 people. I'm sorry, 30,000 people working in that kind of operation. That's minuscule. I mean, it doesn't even show up, and it doesn't even show up. But that's not what the media portrayed. And so that's what they got. They got what the media portrayed, and they got a movie.
Yeah. How much? Yeah, I know that's the unfortunate reality of humans, though, isn't it? How you take a negative and make something out of it like that. But that's a discussion for something totally different. But how much do you still live with what happened that day?
Say it again.
How much do you still live with what happened that day?
Well. It's something you think about when you wake up. There's something to think about when you go to bed. So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. I don't know. To be fair,
you can't change that. And that's if you're a human, is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that BP, or as it was very well known that time, British Petroleum, every 5 seconds Obama opened his mouth, understand that there was humans working behind the scenes as well. And that's why, when you did reach out to me on LinkedIn, it meant a lot that people can hear, from the humans that were working for BP that day as well. And I'm really thankful that you did come out, because, obviously I learned a lot from it, and people who listen to the podcast will also take a lot from it. It probably takes a lot as well from yourself, to come on, having gone through, the whole scenario, and then obviously asking you to kind of go through it or, relive, so to speak, again. But it's great that you've come forward with it. And like I said to you at the start, that my editing is literally sound, and that's about it. And what's been said will all be released exactly as it was. Even the doorbells in the background, I'll try and edit them out.
Sorry, they were doorbells. There was my clock. It was my Vastar clock, because it was
that's how long we've been on for it.
Yeah. So I worked so Vastar was bought by BP, and that's how I actually went to work by BP. I was working for Vastar started in '97, and BP bought them when they bought Arco, because they were owned by Arco, and BP bought them, and that's what you hired. It was my
Yeah, the one question I do ask that I changed now, obviously, since I kind of shaked up and everyone was giving the same answer. But if you look back on your whole career, everything that you've gone through with regards to the oil industry, what probably stands out as your proudest moment?
Well, it's almost impossible to say that after what happened. You lose all. If you if you actually work in oil and gas business and drill wells for a living, you you have to live it day to day. And there's you get if you're in the rodeo, you get thrown off the horse a lot. And I did, But after Macondo happened, I don't have any problems. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one in fairness to really answer. From your perspective, I can't imagine it tarnished a lot, like a lot of your experience, and not tarnished, but put a dampener on unfortunately what I can imagine was a great career for yourself. But yeah, I think yeah, yeah. I don't really know where to go from it, to be honest.
yeah, I mean,
One thing, yeah,
we know I did lots of great wells. I mean, Tiber, this well right here, what he shows you, it was a 35,000-foot TVD, deepest well ever at the time, deepest oil and gas well ever drilled in the world. And we TD'd that well, I think August of 2009. Macondo happened 8 months later. Same rig, exactly the same people. But yeah, you think that make you proud, but once again, it there's really nothing anymore. After what happened, you can't be really happy about it.
no, but I honestly I can't thank you enough for coming on, John, and I will actually reach out to Leo when this podcast comes out as well, to tell him to listen in, so at least he hears, the you know the you know your your side of the story as well, because obviously
just trying to clarify. And let me make a comment about Leo and MI. I mean, at the end, I didn't have a lot of interaction with those guys because their mud was great. Just like all the other people that worked on the rig. I mean, they run a great mud system. MI, I don't know if BP still uses it. I'm sure they do. I just didn't have a lot of. I mean, I really am interested in mud. I was taught by actually one of the guys who was the first mud engineer ever to go offshore ever. So we're very interested in mud, but their mud was good. It didn't have a lot of problems with it, so I didn't interact with it a lot because there was nothing like the mud. Just keep going, baby, Cadillac along. There was so much going on in the rig at one time that it's nice to have something that works good. And Leo's company had a drone crew that worked really good.
I'm sure he'll be. I'm sure. Honestly, I think you'll take a lot from listening to this as well, and I'll certainly let him know when it's out that it's out for him to maybe get get that side of it. But thanks so much for coming on, John. I will say that.
All right. Well, you're very welcome, and you have a good day.